You're listening to episode 16 of the Confident Rider podcast with Jane Pike. Hello, fabulous human. I hope you're having an amazing day out there. We've talked a lot in previous episodes about different techniques and ideas you can use to really get your head and heart in the right space to be able to do or feel like you're able to do what you want to do with your writing. But what we haven't specifically addressed with the same amount of passion and detail is what it is you might have to stop doing that's getting in the way. Now, I would genuinely love to be having this conversation with you in a big comfy chair with a cup of coffee in hand, but we don't have the luxury of being in the same room chatting right now. So what I'm going to share with you are some of the common themes I see come up in this area, in the area of having to stop doing this stuff. And I can almost guarantee you that you'll be nodding your head for at least a few of them, if not all of them. This episode is your guide to 7 things you need to stop doing in order to create the kind of mental and emotional atmosphere that you want. We're going to run through 7 things because I figure that's one thing a day for a week that you can be really mindful of just to get your heart and mind in tune with how it is you want to feel, who it is you want to be, and how it is you want to think. Before we get started, I want to say a huge thank you. Huge thank you. I'm sending you a hug through the airways. To those of you who've left a review or shared the podcast, really, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. If you haven't left a review yet and you think it's something you'd be able to do, I'd be so super grateful. The reviews really do make a difference in podcast land. I know it's kind of a hassle when you're out there to do that sort of thing, and I need to be prompted myself quite a number of times, which is why I'm doing this now. But if you do think that's something you're able to do, review it up. That would be amazing. The other thing, if you don't want to miss an episode, hit subscribe, and that little puppy will appear for you as soon as I've released it at this end. I also post daily content on my social media channels and on my blog. Not so much daily on my blog, but at least a couple of times a week. So make sure you catch up with it there. I'm at The Confident Rider on Facebook, at confident_rider on Instagram, and Confident Rider on YouTube. And I would love to see your name pop up there. That aside, let's get into it. You know something that I'm always saying in my membership group, and that is creating mental strength and emotional resilience is as much about what you don't do as it is about what you do. And that really comes from making constructive changes that benefit you both in and out of the saddle. There's so much that you can do away from your horse. You know, I actually think this is the place to start because then you start to build that mental muscle, you start to implement changes in situations where you're much more in control of the environment or can incrementally make shifts that expand your comfort zone and increase your resilience on a number of levels. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at practices that can be actioned at different points along the way. And most of these aren't a one-time deal. This is especially true of the first point, which is comparisonitis, otherwise known as comparing yourself to other people and feeling crappy as a result. Man alive, haven't we all been here? I think comparisonitis is something that is a human condition. When you're in that space, you feel like you're the only one out there that feels this way. And I know this is a really common affliction. It kind of adds a layer onto a situation that's already not ideal. And the thing that I always feel in those situations is it looks like, especially on social media, that you log on and everyone's qualifying for the Olympics and there you are still trying to stand at the mounting block and summon enough energy to get in the saddle. So what I really find is that comparisonitis strikes when I'm feeling kind of vulnerable, when I'm feeling down about my current situation for whatever reason that might be. This also is particularly pertinent when you're feeling tired or something has run you down in such a way that you don't have the same emotional capacity that perhaps you normally would. I like to think of this as my emotional bank account. So on any given day, there are things which make deposits into my emotional bank account, which are actually the things that uplift me or support me or give me energy. And there are things which draw on that account. And those things differ from one day to the next. With that in mind, we can find that our confidence levels or our bounce back levels are different from one day to the next in the saddle, simply because everything that's been going on around us is different also. So with that in mind, on those days where I've made a lot of withdrawals and perhaps not so many deposits, I find comparisonitis can get a stranglehold at these points. It could also be that I feel like I'm not moving forward as much as I would like to be, or getting the results that I expected. And of course, that comes along with expectations, or perhaps fixing your mind on a specific thing that you want to do at the expense of the process, which is never a good idea. It might be that you've had some kind of setback, or that you're putting way too much pressure on yourself. I know all this because I have been there too. So sending you a fist bump. Little chinks, they open the way for like the self-doubt and the concern and the worry to flourish. So here are a few things that I like to action in those instances. The first one is I'm really mindful of what it is that I'm consuming. And when I say consuming, I mean consuming on a mental and emotional level. If my heart and mind needs a little bit more TLC, then it really makes sense to limit exposure to things that do the opposite, to things that fuel the self-doubt. I will cut down my time on social media if it's something specific that I've seen, or I'm comparing myself to something or someone or something, one and another that's existing in the online space, then I'm in control of how much I see that. And we all are. I think that we feel like there's this stream of information that's coming at us, and actually you are able to really make changes to what goes in front of your eyeballs or what enters your eardrums. So if you don't want to see something, or you feel like repetitively looking at something is actually deflating you more than it is inspiring you, for a period of time, just unfollow or avoid anything that distracts you from your central purpose. Now, I know this isn't curative, right? Like there's stuff that we need to do. We need to do the inner work, and sometimes that's just a matter of actually regrouping. It's not necessarily indicative of low self-esteem or low self-worth. I think we all have those moments where doubt and fear and insecurity creeps in. But if it's something that comes up for you on a regular basis as a mood state, so if comparisonitis is an affliction that you really resonate with and is happening for you more often than not, then we need to have a look beneath the surface and have a look at what's going on there. Typically, we might project to the outside and say, it's them, it's this, that, and the other, but actually we need to be in control of our own emotional flow. And what you essentially have in those moments is a crystal ball that tells you, in these moments you feel this way, what are we going to do about it? So look at it from that perspective as well, and empower yourself to take action in a way that actually benefits you. While we're on this topic, while you fill your cup back up, it's really smart to remove those triggers that you find draining or unhelpful to your cause. So limit your exposure, unfollow or avoid anything that distracts you or that really makes you feel like you enter camp crappy, and just cut down on that stuff for a period of time while you enter the regrouping phase. The second thing I do is I remind myself of my intention. Intention is so important because it really cuts to the chase. And if we've got into the mindset of comparing ourselves to other people or other horse and rider combinations, our focus is off our own stuff and onto the other people's stuff. And we've really given our power away at that point. So shifting it back and realigning with our own intention, it reminds us of our own value and purpose. And one of my favorite statements that I use time and time again is run your own race. So important. We've just got to run our own race. That is something we might have to remind ourselves of on a daily, weekly, monthly, hourly, minutely basis, depending on where it is we've gone or what it is that we're doing. But if you can just continually bring your focus back to your own stuff, realign with your intention, you'll find that you have a much clearer idea of what needs to be done in order for you to move forward with that purpose in mind. Comparison, it really creates uncertainty. It's like a mental fog. In a way, it's its own form of overwhelm, but intention creates clarity. So really check in with your central intention and make sure that you are moving in accordance with that. Number 3 is to remember that you and your horse are a super unique combination. I think this is something that we forget, and it's really such a beautiful thing. Like, this is our superpower. We are unique combinations, so it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing because we have our own formula that's going on with our horse. Now, sometimes that formula works and sometimes it doesn't, but what we're in a position to do is really keep focusing on our own stuff. I know I just said that, so important, but to make sure that you recognize that other things work for other people, some things are going to work for you. You need to be able to draw on your resources, to experiment, to be willing to let go of perfectionism so that you can actually adopt a model and a level of understanding. Create a language with your horse that is pertinent and relevant to both of you so that you are really doing your own thing. Make a structured plan for the week. If you've got to that point of really looking outside and feeling less than, make a structured plan for the week and keep your focus on what needs to happen for you and your horse in the immediate future. The 4th thing, comparison, it really perpetuates that feeling of lack. We feel less than, we feel unworthy, we feel not good enough, all of those things which come in as a result of getting into that comparison cycle. So the antidote to that is to cultivate feelings of appreciation. A couple of questions for you to consider at that point is, well, what's working right now? Like, what could we choose to feel good about if we really put our hearts and minds to it? So I think all of these things are really good ways of drawing our attention back inward to putting a plan in place that works for us in the moment. And what that does is creates momentum that shifts us from that point. Number 2 of the things that we need to stop is to stop worrying about what might happen. When I say this, I have a series of little voices that pop up in my head that I know are going to be some of the common responses that people will say to me in response to this, that perhaps you will say to me in response to this. Easier said than done is one of them. And I say, well, you know what? Admittedly, when you start taking responsibility for what tracks through your brain space on a regular basis, sure thing, it can take a bit of doing. But that, to my mind, seems like a far rosier option than just letting it run away like a speeding bull. Is that the saying? It might be a speeding train. Anyway, something that's running fast. That's what your mind is doing away from you. And I know I get a similar feeling when I see dark chocolate sitting on the shelf, unloved. I mean, how sad is that? But anyway, that's a whole different podcast topic. What I'm saying is, yes, I'm not suggesting that any of these things are necessarily easy. However, one of the things we need to be aware of is that neurons that fire together wire together. And that means that every thought that you have creates similar thoughts. So it's like they have little thought babies, and pretty soon there's an entire thought family that's camping out in your brain that is specific to that thought that you think about, which means that if you consistently cultivate anxious thoughts or negative in inverted commas, let's use the word non-constructive instead, non-constructive thoughts or perhaps fearful thoughts, it becomes much easier for you to default to that way of thinking because you have made those thought pathways stronger. So what we need to do is, if we find ourselves going down worry street, and of course there's a level of mindfulness and a level of awareness that has to come along with this, we need to pull the handbrake on and do something to interrupt that stream of thought. What we want that to look like is something that's non-habitual. So it really can be anything that will disrupt the pathway, disrupt that neurological pathway. what I often do is write a list of things that I can refer to, and I call that my list for when the suckies strike, for when things kind of suck. So I don't have to think about it in the moment. So I know that this is my feel-good list. These are things that I can do to interrupt that flow. And the thing is, those little voices, the itty-bitty shitty committee at that point might come up and say, whatever, it's not worth it, don't do that, like there's no point, you're already in this funk, might as well surrender to it. I say, not the case, itty bitty shitty committee. We can actually redirect this train or charging bull or whatever it is that we started with and take it in a different direction. And it can be really super simple. It might be that you just read a few pages of a book, that you put on some music, or you watch an uplifting clip on YouTube. You might do like 10 star jumps or just run around the garden and look like completely out of place. But what that will do is actually break that cycle. What I love is if you're able to do something that makes you laugh or that makes you feel slightly kooky, then that is a great pattern interrupter, because laughter is such a light feeling. And when we're able to inject some humor into a situation that previously felt really humorless, then there's nothing better that can interrupt the cycle than that. So interrupting that worry cycle is really, really important. And it's one of the skills that we focus a lot in on my online program. But today we're going to step into number 3, which is stop putting off things that need to get done. I know as soon as I say that, you're going to have a whole bunch of stuff that pops up into your mind that you need to be getting done. And the thing is, I didn't even realize this, but there are things which I can do now, which I will put off doing because I feel like I can do them later. Isn't that ridiculous? And so one of the rules of thumb that I've developed is if something pops up that takes me less than a minute to do, I do it now. Like I do it right there and then. And this one thing alone can lessen the amount of mental clutter you feel by like a cajillion %. And that's official figures, by the way. So if you need to get something done and you don't do it, then it hangs around your brain space like a foggy mist. It just sucks energy up, and that energy is something we could be using for a whole lot more interesting stuff. The metaphor analogy that I like to use is if you think of having a whole bunch of apps open on your phone. I'm speaking from experience. I'm just looking at my phone right now thinking that's something that I need to change. But the battery obviously goes dead faster simply because there's so many things that are running in the background. It also slows down the response time to things that you have open. So you might be searching something or trying to open something on a particular app that you are working with, and the whole running time behind the scenes is slower simply because that working memory space has been taken up. The same thing happens in our minds. If we have all of these little things that need to be taken care of that we haven't taken care of or delegated or arranged for or organized for in some way, that takes up our energy. It takes up clutter in our minds. So we procrastinate on these things often just for the sake of it. So if you know that there's something that you need to do, if you want to book that lesson, if you want to get help with that thing or do whatever the thingamajig is you need to do, call the farrier, that constant low-grade thinking about that is draining your resources. So do it now. Do it now. The other thing that this includes is training. So things that you currently find challenging in training, and this one's really relevant for me because I train alone. Like I live in a place where there isn't a huge amount of availability to different training options. And for me, most of the input that I receive training-wise comes from being online, online programs, self-teaching, feeding back via video. So it's really easy for me because I don't have someone telling me what's what to avoid the things that I perhaps find challenging or that I'm not as good at, just so that I can be in that more enjoyable or easy, comfortable space. But what we need to ensure is that we are intentionally directing our energy towards the training things with our horses that we need to actually work on. That doesn't mean that you have to spend the entire session doing that, but it does mean that you need to allow for some element of that to be inclusive within what it is that you're doing. So have a look at what it is you've been putting off in terms of what's creating mental clutter for you right now. And then secondly, looking at what is needing to be included in your training that perhaps you're avoiding or not including to the extent that it needs to be. Right, how are we trucking? We are already up to number 4. It's a big one. Stop being anywhere but where you are now. And this is all about being present. If there is anything like the big kahuna, the numero uno of things that horses require of us, it's really an ability to anchor ourselves in the present moment. I am so passionate about this that I've just created, or am in the midst of creating, it'll be released this week, a course for Joyride called Presence, which really allows us to develop that awareness of ourselves and maintain a sense of awareness while we move in the world, which is something that we lose quite often. If you think about how aware you are of feeling and sensation as you engage in activity which requires some form of concentration or attention, chances are most of your focus will be on the outside and there'll be very little attention, if any, on where it is you are in terms of that feeling space. So that's something that I'm really keen to develop, and I think that is really necessary to develop when it comes to working with our horses. Many of the challenges we face with them comes about as a consequence of our inability to be present. And if we think about mood states such as worry or anxiety, they are all future-focused fears. And they pull us out of our body, so they dissociate us and they cause us to mentally levitate in a different space. And in many instances, the story that we tell ourselves, the narratives that we create around our situations are far worse than the positions that we currently find ourselves in. Not only that, but cultivating the ability to be present, it's vital in developing feelings of trust and safety in our horses. And let me explain to you why. If we're off in the future or we are ruminating or thinking about things that have happened in the past, we can't simultaneously be aware of what's going on right now. It's not possible. And our horses know that. And as a consequence, they feel the need to maintain a sense of alertness to ensure that they aren't missing information, basically, that will impact their safety and welfare. It's like if you're doodling on your phone, they don't trust that you're going to see the mountain lion that's creeping up from behind, and chances are you probably won't. So they maintain this sense of alertness or vigilance because they really trust or doubt your ability to be trustworthy as a partner and a protector. So if you find yourself floating off, the easiest way is to bring your attention back to your body and breath, because it's our mind or our thought process that has that superpower, that has that ability to project into the future or spin back into the past. But our body and breath are always in the present moment. So things like focusing how your feet feel on the ground or really understanding the connection that your foot makes with the stirrup, all of those things will really start to drop you back into your body and bring you back into the present moment. Number 5 kind of relates to number 3, I think. Stop tolerating things which can be changed. I mean, how good are we at this? To our credit, we can put up with a whole lot of shizzle, like aches and pains, stuff that pops up daily. I'm saying aches and pains because that's been my modus operandi for this week. But emotional messengers as well, like in the form of uncomfortable emotions that we might turn away from or that we might ignore or suppress. We are masters of keeping on, but not necessarily at blowing it out of the ballpark and really thriving. I want you to think of something that you've been tolerating, and today I want you to take action on making it better. For instance, the reason I say the aches and pains are kind of my thing at the moment is because I've been doing a whole lot of coursework creation, and as a result of that, I've been sitting at my computer for longer than normal and not getting enough exercise. And I know in order to keep me feeling well, I need to do a daily yoga practice because my back is something that starts to ache if I don't. So I've let that slide and I'm tolerating the discomfort, but really what I should be doing is carving out time to make sure that I'm introducing things that allow me to feel well. It's a changeable situation. You know the other thing that's really changeable? Confidence, anxiety, fear. They are changeable situations too. And often we let them fester until we get into a situation that's not functional. But I want to tell you, it doesn't have to be that way. I honestly see massive transformations daily in this exact area, and I can help you get your groove on there if you want. Joyride is the place to do that, and you can check that out, confidentrider.online/joyride. Number 6, stop filling your mind with clutter. There's a lot of attention that we pay to the things that we feed our body. We're really concerned about this. Are we getting enough water? Yada, yada, yada. But not the same amount of care to what we feed ourselves mentally and emotionally. Now, these days, I am ruthless about what I let into my heart and mind. And I notice the more selective I am, the purer my filter becomes, in that I notice the effect that something will have on me that perhaps is, violent or upsetting, or really anything that has a high emotional charge, or not even a high emotional charge. Like, I just notice that I'm much more, I think I notice the impact more. That's what I'm trying to say, that I notice how the things that we consume do have an effect on, not only what we're thinking, but things like sleep quality, everything like that. So the clips that do the rounds on social media, I'm thinking of you. The top 10 worst falls. Look at this massive horse riding crash at jump number 7. Or here's a photo of the moment things went very badly wrong just before we crashed and burned. Those are things I don't need or want to see. And it doesn't mean that I'm not compassionate towards those situations or empathetic, or that if I needed to watch them for some kind of constructive purpose that I wouldn't. It's just that if I do need to take feedback from something or watch something, there has to be a reason as to why I'm choosing to take that information in. Everything we consume creates an impression. So every time you watch or listen or read about something, you are filling up your internal library with resources that either support your purpose or detract from it. So think of everything you consume as an invitation to invite that into your experience. If you're nervous about jumping, for instance, and you really want to make sure that when you're out there doing it, you have all of your resources available, then make sure that what you have allowed into your mind is something that will assist you when you need to draw on it. We need to make sure that what we go about investing in is an actual investment in our mindset and emotional health. So seek out the things which create clarity and inspiration, and really avoid those things which have a similar effect on our mental nutrition as a high sugar diet, because lots of us are out there consuming mental junk food and emotional junk food on a daily basis, and then wondering why we're feeling not quite the way we want to feel. So keep that in mind, because it's super important. Number 7, it's a big one. I am going to go on and on about this, but stop trying to do it all by yourself. Dudes, we need to get better at asking for help. I don't know what the big deal is about asking for help. We feel like it's some kind of weakness or flaw in ourselves, and it's really not. Like, we are not designed to be doing it all ourselves. Actually, I lie when I say I don't know what the big deal is. I do know what the big deal is, because we are training ourselves to think that we're supposed to be these independent units that's got it all figured out. And somehow, if we ask for help, then we are alerting everyone out there to the fact that maybe we don't have it as together as perhaps we would like. It's not about having it together. It's not about having all the answers. You don't have to know it all. You don't have to go it alone. And really, the most common barrier to getting help is not asking for it. Seriously, we have to give that help muscle a workout, and we need to do it again and again. The golden rules around it are to ask early. And the reason this is so important is because if you leave your help asking to the point where it's an emergency, then you're coming from a point of desperation rather than consideration. And you really need to make sure that when you're asking for help, you're considered about who it is you're asking for help from, and you're also able to be in a space where you're able to take what you need from that and perhaps discard what doesn't serve you. The second thing is to ask often. Just get used to asking for help. I am asking for help all of the time. I have my little circle of awesome that I go to, that if I get stuck in training or I feel like something's not going the way that I want it to, I let them know. Sometimes all we need is an ear to say, oh man, this was a day from the backwater. Or we have a question about training that we can get clarified. But if you don't ask for help, then you stay in that space and small things can become big things at that point. And that's really what we want to avoid. The last thing is to do it kindly. Make sure you're asking for help with compassion and with kindness, because people are busy. We get that. It's not always personal. This is a huge thing. Like, what if they say no? If they say no, that's okay. Then you move on to someone else and you recognize that it's not always about you. It's not always about them. Sometimes it's a situation that just isn't working in that particular context, in terms of they might not be available to be able to give you help at that particular point. No problem. Like, it will be someone out there that can. We also want to be really selective with who it is that we are asking for help from, because we often draw on people who aren't actually available to us. And I don't mean available physically, but available emotionally or in whatever context we need in that space. So make sure that you are selective and that you're discerning and that you are asking early, asking often, and doing it with kindness. I think that's a wrap today. I'm really hoping that you have got something from this particular episode that you can stop doing. And I'd encourage you to either break it down, so write down each thing each day that you're going to focus on, or just choose one thing that you know you can stop doing that will have a cumulative and roll-on effect for the rest of your writing and your mindset. It has been a pleasure as usual. You know that if you want to work together or explore things, I have loads of content available on my social media channels, and you can join my online program if you're really like, yes, I do need help. Why am I staying stuck in this space? Joyride may be for you, so check that out, confidentwriter.online/joyride. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode, or talking with you at least. That's probably how it's going to roll. Have a great week, guys. I'll see you on the flip side.